The Creator sleeps within you, and everything you live is what He dreams. There is a silent force that acts behind every birth, not just of bodies, but of ideas, encounters, choices, a forgotten matrix, a generation code, not taught in schools, not revealed in books, but revered by masters, hidden for centuries, and whispered by Thoth to those who knew how to listen. Perhaps the greatest secret of creation is not to desire, but to fertilize, not to control, but to cultivate. Because the universe does not respond to extremes, it responds to fusion. Within you, two principles are in constant dance. One acts, the other receives. One expands, the other sustains. But while they do not recognize each other, reality becomes a fractured reflection. Rootless desires, intuitions without action, cycles that never complete. The law of gender does not speak of bodies, it speaks of fields, of pulses, of creative archetypes. And those who understand this principle stop forcing and begin to generate, because only those who have learned to unite truly create. Have you ever stopped to wonder where everything that exists comes from? Not just the visible forms, but also the thoughts, desires, ideas, synchronicities. There is a point of origin before manifestation, a creative core that precedes form, that outlines the contours of reality even before it exists. And this point of origin pulses within you. For the ancient masters, there is no creation without union. Everything that is born is first generated, and what is generated does not arise from a single principle, but from the fusion of two, from the masculine that directs and the feminine that nourishes. This is not a matter of human gender. It is a cosmic principle, a hidden code inscribed in all things. The law of gender, as taught by Hermes, Trismegistus, and recorded by Thoth, reveals that absolutely everything, from atoms to galaxies, from projects to emotions, carries within itself an active polarity and a receptive polarity. Nothing manifests without this combination. Nothing materializes without this inner marriage between impulse and containment, action and gestation. When you have an idea and put it into practice, you are using this principle. When you inhale deeply and then release the air, you are following this rhythm. When you plant an intention and see it bloom, you are embodying this code. But the problem is that most people live in imbalance. Some are stuck in the pole of constant action, always doing, always fighting, always accelerating. Others remain in eternal planning, collecting ideas, feeling deeply, waiting for the perfect moment that never comes. And when one of the principles dominates, the other falls asleep. Creation does not happen, or it is born fragile, unstable, rootless. Because reality does not respond to isolated force. It responds to fusion, to the harmony between principles, to the balance that generates life. And that is exactly what the universe tries to teach every day, through repeating patterns, unrealized desires, cycles that do not close. It's not bad luck. It's an incomplete code. True creation begins when you learn to unite within yourself what the world insists on keeping separate. When you recognize that your rational side needs intuition to be wise, that your strength needs pause to be effective, that your action needs listening to be fair, you stop being an executor and become a generator, a conscious creator. But that requires a new kind of perception, one that goes beyond the linear mind, that can feel what has not yet been said, intuit what has not yet taken form, and gestate with presence that which desires to be born. Thoth knew that power did not lie in brute force, nor in passive contemplation. True power lies at the point where impulse meets direction, and where direction meets support. It is at this point that reality begins to bend, not because you force it, but because you have become the fertile ground where creation happens. Only what finds a terrain where opposing forces work in synergy can bloom, and within you, that same dynamic takes place, even if you haven't yet realized it. The principle of the masculine and the feminine is not about biological gender, nor about social roles. It speaks of two universal energies that act in everything that exists. The force that directs and the one that receives. The one that initiates and the one that sustains. The one that penetrates the world with intention, and the one that shapes it with sensitivity. These two archetypes live within you, and the balance between them is what determines the kind of reality you are building or postponing. The masculine side of consciousness is the one that acts, structures, focuses, defines. It is the energy that cuts through excess, that points the way, that holds order. The feminine side is the one that feels, listens, intuits, transforms. It is the space where the idea develops, where emotion finds language, where the invisible prepares to be born. When you think with clarity and feel with depth, you are uniting the two. When you decide with firmness and wait with wisdom, you are operating from the axis. But when one side dominates, imbalance sets in, and creation becomes dissonant. Maybe you've experienced this. That phase of high productivity, but with a sense of emptiness, or moments of deep sensitivity, but without clear direction. All of these are signs that the poles are not in dialogue. The masculine without the feminine becomes rigidity. The feminine without the masculine becomes dispersion. And the most curious part, this imbalance does not happen only in emotions or behaviors. It shapes your vibrational field. The way you express yourself, the choices you make, the connections you attract. The masculine archetype helps you build healthy boundaries, maintain focus, bring projects into the world. But alone, it can harden your gaze, block listening, prevent blooming. The feminine connects you with intuition, with cycles, with the language of the body and the soul. But alone, it can trap you in the inner world, hinder progress, delay important decisions. Wisdom lies in neither idolizing one nor rejecting the other. It lies in allowing these two forces to consciously inhabit you, to communicate, to adjust, to reveal themselves. And more than that, in learning to listen to them, because every challenge in your life is showing which of these principles needs to be activated or refined. If you feel lost, maybe it's time to activate the masculine, to give shape, to choose, to cut excess. If you're forcing too much, maybe you need the feminine to soften, to breathe, to welcome silence. This listening is internal, but it changes everything on the outside. Because the more you balance these archetypes within yourself, the more coherent your frequency becomes, and the field begins to respond with more flow, with more harmony, with less noise and less resistance. Thoth knew that the universe did not respond only to intentions. It responded to the state of alignment between opposing forces. That's why he didn't just write what he saw. He recorded the movement between the poles, the dance between impulse and receptivity, between the word and the silence, between what is born and what sustains the birth. This dance is happening inside you all the time, but when it is unconscious, it becomes conflict. When it becomes conscious, it becomes creation. And the most impressive thing is realizing that by uniting both archetypes, you not only find balance, you expand, because there is no greater power than a human being in harmony with their own polarities. It is at this point that you stop repeating inherited patterns. and begin to write a reality that truly resonates with who you are, whole. But most people don't reach that point, because before integrating, they try to compensate. And compensation is what fuels imbalance and sabotages creation. When you disconnect from one of the poles, the other starts operating in excess. And all energy in excess, no matter how positive it may seem, distorts the original vibration. You try to act, but you're disconnected from listening. You try to feel, but without direction. You try to co-create, but with uncoordinated internal forces. And what happens? Life stalls. Reality drags on. Intentions do not manifest clearly because there is no coherence in the broadcast. You want a new experience, but the field perceives noise. It doesn't know whether it's time to move forward or to wait, to stand firm or to release control. This lack of energetic definition causes the universe not to respond as it could. Not out of punishment, but out of vibrational logic. Because everything you emit in misalignment returns with delay, noise, or blockage. And then the vicious cycle of frustration begins. You believe you're doing everything right, but the results don't show up, so you doubt, force, repeat, or give up. But the problem was never the desire. It was the internal state behind it. You can desire with clarity and still maintain a divided field. One side wants it, the other doesn't believe. One feels, the other doubts. And this energetic split causes creation to fail before it even begins. That's why many visualizations don't work. Affirmations don't hold. Powerful methods seem useless in practice, because without inner unity, there is no consistent vibration. And without consistent vibration, the field doesn't recognize the command. Thoth understood this. He knew that the word is not enough. The word has power, but only when it is born from the union of intention and presence. When the feminine and the masculine are not in harmony. You think one thing, feel another, act in a confused way, and reality mirrors that fragmentation. You may even manifest, but not what you desired, instead, what you are vibrating more consistently. And almost always, that consistency comes from a side you don't notice, from an unbalanced energy operating silently and setting the pace of your life without you seeing it. Maybe it's an excess of rigidity. You learned that only those who do, who dominate, who never stop, succeed. And in that belief, you run over the signs, ignore timing, refuse the process. Or maybe it's the opposite, a surrender that's too passive. You wait for everything to come, for the universe to solve it all, for life to surprise you. But you forget to direct, to choose, to sustain presence. Both postures are born from the same imbalance, the refusal to integrate. And here's the point. There's no use trying to balance only through behavior. The adjustment starts in the field, in the reconciliation between the two principles that govern creation. You don't need to do more, nor feel more. You need to align, to place each energy in its rightful place, to give voice to what is silent, and silence to what screams too loudly. This alignment is not achieved in a rush. It reveals itself in listening. Listening to your impulses, listening to your emotions, listening to your emptiness, because even they are saying something. Silence is not the absence of a response. It is the interval where the field reorganizes the next creation. And only those who respect that time understand that nothing is still, even when everything seems paused. It is in that space of listening that true alchemy begins. You stop reacting and begin adjusting, organizing the inner chaos like someone realigning the hands of their own destiny. Thoth knew it is not excess action that transforms. It is the precision of a gesture sustained by coherence. You may have great ideas, powerful visions, noble intentions. But if the foundation is cracked, the universe responds with cracks. That's why everything you create without alignment carries with it the weight of what you haven't integrated. The rush, the fear, the doubt, all of it leaks through the field. And what was meant to be light becomes heavy. What was meant to be fluid gets stuck. What was meant to expand you drains you. But when the masculine and the feminine dance in balance, the vibration gains strength. You don't just desire something, you emanate it. You don't just focus, you sustain. You don't just feel, you give direction to the feeling. In this state, the field hears you with clarity, because your presence speaks louder than any word, and reality responds with precision. It's at this point that creation stops being an attempt and becomes an extension. Nothing is forced anymore, nor projected in a rush. What once seemed unreachable now arises naturally, not because the world changed, but because you accessed a new frequency of presence. You are no longer divided between action and intuition, impulse and pause, control and surrender. You have become the place where these forces meet. This is the true meaning of the sacred, the union of opposites within a single being, not as a theory, but as a state. When the masculine in you stops competing with the feminine, the space is born where the invisible takes shape with fluidity, without noise, without effort. Thoth understood this principle. To him, the universe wasn't separated between spirit and matter, thought and emotion, heaven and earth. It was a single organism where all duality existed only to generate movement, until the movement found harmony. That harmony is not a static state, it's a dance, an intelligence that listens and acts at the right time, that intuits and manifests with precision, that doesn't get lost in extremes, but navigates the middle with mastery. And it is when this dance settles within you that the field begins to respond differently. You feel that you're in the right place, even if the world doesn't understand yet. You know what you must do, even without all the guarantees. You're no longer in a rush, nor do you hold back out of fear, because now there is unity within. At this point, the Creator awakens. You are no longer trying to change reality. You are co-creating with it. And co-creating is different from desiring. It's different from asking. Co-creating is recognizing that reality is moldable, but only bends to coherent states. From here on, every choice you make has vibrational weight. Every word carries a code. Every silence guides the field. You stop operating out of habit and start operating out of awareness. It is in this state that the portal opens. The portal of conscious creation is not a place, it's a frequency, a precise resonance between what you think, feel, and sustain. When this alignment happens, the signs become clearer, coincidences increase, resistance disappears, not because the universe has become easier, but because you have become more truthful, more whole, more present, and the universe loves presence, because presence doesn't lie, doesn't doubt, doesn't try. Presence simply is, and that alone is enough to move everything around it. You may not understand all the details, you may not have all the answers, but when you are present, you align with the rhythm that guides all creations, with the sound that precedes form, with the intelligence that stitches the invisible to the visible. In this space, you stop being reaction and become influence, not through control, but through resonance. Reality begins to gravitate around your frequency because it has no choice. Everything responds to the most coherent center. Thoth knew that this center was the access point to the higher dimensions of creation. The mind aligned with the heart, the spirit rooted in the body, the intention guiding the manifestation. This is the geometry of creation, the fusion of the poles within a single axis, your own. And here lies the most subtle mystery of the law of gender. It doesn't speak only about masculine and feminine as human expressions. It reveals a code of balance that cuts through all planes, and when understood, it changes your destiny. Because when you sustain that harmony, everything that once felt like struggle turns into flow. What was resistance becomes momentum. And what seemed like absence reveals itself as preparation. Life is no longer delayed. It is in step with what you've become. And what do you become when you integrate both poles? You become fertile ground. You become a creative channel. You become a vibrational response to what once seemed impossible. This is the peak of co-creation. Not when you convince the universe to give you something, but when you become the space where that thing can be born. And that changes everything. It is from that internal point that the ancient teaching of Thoth begins to make sense, not as myth, but as vibrational instruction. Thoth didn't transmit doctrines to be worshipped. He delivered keys, and those keys aren't unlocked with blind faith, but with aligned frequency. The temple he guarded wasn't made of stone, but of consciousness. And in that temple, everything has rhythm, everything has polarity, but above all, everything has direction. The law of gender is the hidden mechanism behind that direction. It is the force that fertilizes, that unites the invisible with manifestation, that connects the creative spark to the human gesture. There is no creation without union, and there is no union without inner balance. That's why Thoth was not seen merely as a scribe, but as an architect of the real, the one who understood the invisible gears that sustained the visible. And among those gears, the principle of gender was central, because everything that is born from two poles, but only manifests when it finds coherence. This is the key. What has not yet been born in your life may not be blocked due to lack of action, but due to the absence of inner union. Maybe you have clarity about what you want, but you're still divided inside, between desiring and allowing, between intuiting and trusting, between imagining and sustaining. Thoth called this state an unfinished crossing. It's when the creative energy has already been activated, but has not yet found an available receptacle. And the receptacle is not an external place. It's an internal field of readiness, a vibrational matrix where the seed can flourish. This matrix is created when the two aspects of being, the active and the receptive, come into harmony. They no longer fight. They no longer alternate with conflict, but dance in sync. When that happens, creation stops being an attempt and becomes inevitable. It doesn't matter if it's a new idea, a relationship, a phase, or a project. Everything you manifest is born from your predominant vibrational state, and that state is not static. It is shaped by each thought you feed, each emotion you welcome, each silent choice you make. It's at this point that Thoth's teaching becomes living practice. Conscious creation begins when you stop denying half of yourself. It's not about becoming all action, nor about dissolving into contemplation. It's about inhabiting both poles with awareness and knowing when one must lead and when the other needs to open. This is true mastery, not over the world, but over your field, over what you are emitting without realizing. And here is where most people go wrong. They believe they are creating something new, when in truth they are repeating the same frequency in a different form. Thoth taught that before any external gesture, reality had already been sealed within. The word always came after the silence. Action always preceded by listening. That's why the most powerful manifestations aren't born in noise, but in stillness. In that lucid pause, where you access the real desire, no longer the need disguised as wanting. That difference is subtle, but it changes everything. Because the universe doesn't respond to what you say. It responds to what you vibrate with consistency. And consistency is only born from fusion. From the marriage between intention and receptivity. Between focus and trust. Between direction and surrender. That's why, for Thoth, creation was a sacred act. Not because it demanded perfection, but because it demanded presence. And presence, when it becomes a dwelling, activates codes that were dormant. You begin to realize that certain paths only open when you become someone who knows how to sustain them. That what you want only finds you when you've stopped chasing and started becoming. This is the legacy, and this is the key. Maybe now you understand that true creation doesn't happen when everything seems ready, but when you become fertile space. The law of gender is not just a hidden principle of the universe. It is a mirror of your ability to generate reality, to unite purpose with presence, direction with surrender, firmness with receptivity. Thoth left clues so that seekers would not only understand the cosmos, but also learn to gestate a new destiny. And that begins when you stop waiting for results and start fertilizing states. Change doesn't happen through trying, it blossoms when there is maturity to sustain the frequency that attracts the new. Nothing said here is merely theoretical. All of it is applicable. With each choice, with each silence. Every time you ask yourself if you're vibrating with what you want to live, or just trying to force what doesn't yet have the structure to be born. As Carl Jung said, he who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens. You don't need more knowledge. You need integration. And it's in that inner union between conscious action and true listening that the universe begins to dance to your rhythm. Creation doesn't happen when you force it. It happens when you become the channel through which the invisible finds form. Everything you're seeking is waiting for you to become the space where it can be generated. If this episode touched something within you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. In the comments, write, "I am the space where the new is born." Share it with someone who needs to remember the power they carry, even when they don't feel it yet. This is the final video in the series, The 7 Hermetic Laws. Click the icon to watch other episodes, and then access the full playlist to dive into each of these timeless teachings. The universe only reveals itself fully when you learn to see with both eyes of consciousness, presence, and integration.